I'm going to talk while I drive because if I stop talking, I think I'll turn around. And if I turn around, I don't think I'll make it back. My name is Elliot Crane. I'm a field safety auditor for the Missouri Department of Transportation. That means I drive. I drive a lot. I drive state highways and county roads and farm-to-market 2 lanes, checking signage, guardrail condition, shoulder erosion, drainage compliance. I have a truck with a dash cam and a magnetic MoDOT placard and a clipboard I still use even though everything syncs to the tablet. I've done this for 11 years. I know every mile of US 63 between Rolla and Kirksville by the texture of the asphalt under my tires. Today is Wednesday. I left Jefferson City at 5:40 a.m., headed south toward the Lake of the Ozarks region for a scheduled bridge deck inspection series on Route 54. 3 bridges, routine stuff. I had my thermos, my clipboard, my high-vis vest folded on the passenger seat. I had the radio on, KRCG out of Jeff City, then lost the signal around Eldon and switched to a local station. Country format, farm reports. That's where I was when the first siren test went off. Now, siren tests aren't unusual. First Wednesday of every month, most counties in Missouri run their outdoor warning sirens at a set time. Usually mid-morning, usually brief. You hear them, you check the sky, you see blue, you move on. I've heard hundreds. This one started at 9:15 a.m. I was on Route 54, just east of the lake, about 2 miles from my first bridge site. The siren came through clean. The full cycle, the rise, the hold, the fall. Maybe 90 seconds total. Standard. What was not standard was the radio. The local station I'd been listening to, some little AM outfit, didn't catch the call sign cut out the moment the siren started. Not reduced, not overridden. Cut. Dead air. And the moment the siren wound down and stopped, the station came back mid-sentence like nothing happened. And the truck ahead of me on the highway was gone. I need to be precise about this because precision is the only thing I've got right now. I was following a white dual-axle flatbed, had a load of banded lumber on the back, Missouri plates, commercial, was maybe 300 yards ahead of me, doing about 55. I remember this because I'd been pacing it for several miles. It was going slightly under the limit, and I was in no rush. The siren started. The radio cut out. I looked down at the dial for maybe 2 seconds muscle memory, checking if the station dropped or if I'd lost the frequency. When I looked up, the truck was gone. No brake lights, no turn, no exit ramp, no intersection. Route 54 runs straight and open through that stretch, gentle grade, good visibility. I could see at least a mile of road ahead. The truck was not on it. There was no shoulder disturbance, no dust, no debris from an accident, no tire marks. The lumber, the flatbed, the driver, all of it, just absent. I slowed down and scanned both sides. Farmland, fence line, nothing. I told myself it must have turned off onto a private road I didn't see. Maybe a farm access point behind a tree line. That's plausible. That happens. I almost believed it too, until I looked in the rear view. There had been a dark green SUV behind me, maybe a quarter-mile back. A family vehicle. I'd noticed a bike rack on the rear hitch when it had been closer a few miles earlier. That SUV was also gone. Same conditions, same stretch of road. Nothing behind me for as far as the mirror showed. I pulled over, got out, stood on the shoulder in the quiet. No wind, no traffic. Nothing coming from either direction. The sky was flat blue, not a cloud. The sirens had stopped. The world sounded completely normal except for the total absence of any vehicle other than mine. I got back in the truck, turned the radio up. The station was playing Garth Brooks. I sat there for maybe 45 seconds before I put the truck back in drive and continued toward my bridge site. I was not afraid yet. I was confused. Fear came later. Fear came when the sirens went off again. The first bridge on my inspection list crosses a tributary of the Osage River about 4 miles east of the dam. It's a simple concrete deck span. 2 lanes, built in 1987. Last rated in acceptable condition. I've inspected it twice before. I know where the spalling is. I know which expansion joint needs flagging. I pulled onto the shoulder at the east approach at approximately 9:35 a.m. Got out, put on my vest, grabbed the clipboard and the crack gauge, walked to the bridge rail and looked over. There was a boat on the water below. An aluminum bass boat, maybe 16 feet, with a trolling motor mounted on the bow. It was drifting, engine off, no one in it. That's not inherently alarming. People fish that tributary. Boats get loose. But the boat was drifting in a slow circle near the east bank, and there was a rod still in the holder and a tackle box open on the rear bench. The kind of arrangement that says someone was just here. I noted it. Took a photo for my own records, not for the inspection. Walked the bridge deck, did my measurements, logged the spalling progression, flagged the joint. Professional routine. And I was grateful for it because routine is a kind of anchor. I was on the west end of the bridge, crouched near the guardrail, when the second siren started, 10:07 a.m. This one was closer. I could feel it in my sternum. The full rise, the hold, that long, heavy tone that sits on the air like pressure. I stayed crouched. I didn't look at my phone or my radio. I just stayed still and watched the road. A pickup truck had been approaching from the west while I was working. Red, older model Chevy. I'd seen it maybe half a mile out coming toward me. I watched it. The siren held its tone. The truck was maybe 200 yards from the bridge, then 100. I could see the driver. Male, ball cap, one hand on the wheel. The siren began to wind down. I watched. I did not blink. I did not look away. The siren stopped. The truck was gone. Not behind a hill. Not past me. Gone. The road was empty in both directions. The echo of the siren faded into the trees, and the air was still, and the asphalt just stretched out clean and bare into the morning like the truck had never been on it. I stood up. My hands were shaking. The clipboard rattled against my thigh. The boat below the bridge was also gone. I got back in my truck and tried to call my supervisor. Linda Pruitt, district office in Jeff City. 4 rings, voicemail. I left a message that sounded insane, even as I was leaving it. Something about a vehicle disappearing on 54, possible road hazard, requesting callback. I tried the MODOT dispatch line. Busy signal, not voicemail busy. I haven't heard a genuine busy signal in years. I tried my wife, Sophie. She works from home in Fulton, about 90 minutes northeast of where I was. Straight to voicemail. No rings. I tried 911. It connected. A dispatcher answered. Female voice. Camden County. I told her I wanted to report a possible missing motorist on Route 54. She asked for the mile marker. I gave it. She asked for a vehicle description. I described the red Chevy. She said she'd dispatch a unit for a welfare check and asked if I needed anything else. I said, "Did you hear the sirens?" She paused. Then she said, "The monthly test?" "Yes, sir." Standard Wednesday test. "There were 2, I said. One around 9:15 and another at 10:07. Another pause. Longer this time. "Sir, the scheduled test is at 10 a.m. one cycle. That's all that should have run this morning." "I heard 2. I'll make a note of it. Is there anything else?" I wanted to say. A truck disappeared in front of me. A boat vanished from a river. The road is empty, and it should not be empty at this time of morning on a state highway. Something is wrong. Instead, I said no, thanked her, and hung up. I sat in the truck watching the road. In 11 years of driving Missouri highways, I have never seen Route 54 this empty during business hours. Not during weather, not during holidays, not once. It was 10:14 a.m. I had 2 more bridges to inspect. I put the truck in drive. I should not have kept going south. Bridge MO-54-1178 is 6 miles further south, longer span, 4 lanes at that point, crosses a broader arm of the lake where 54 curves west. I pulled up to it at 10:31 a.m., and the first thing I noticed was the car. A silver Honda Accord was stopped on the bridge. Not pulled over, stopped. Right lane, about midway across, engine off. Driver's door open. No one in it or near it. I rolled up slow, parked behind it, and got out. The keys were in the ignition. The engine was warm. A phone sat in the cup holder, screen on, showing a half-composed text message. The text read, "Heard the sirens again. Is that Norm?" And stopped. Unfinished. Unsent. I looked over the bridge rail. The lake's surface below was calm. No boats, no swimmers, no disturbance of any kind. On the far side of the bridge, the road curved into trees, and I could see maybe a quarter mile of empty highway. Nothing moving. I went back to the Accord and looked more carefully. There was a purse on the passenger seat, a jacket draped over the back, a water bottle in the door pocket, half full, a child's booster seat in the rear, empty. The car had been occupied recently by someone who expected to keep driving. I photographed everything. Make, model, plate number. The unfinished text, the booster seat. I don't know why I was documenting this so carefully. Some part of my brain was already building a report for someone I hadn't identified yet. Then I walked the bridge deck and did my inspection. I clung to procedure the way you cling to a handrail in turbulence. Measured the cracks, checked the bearing pads, noted water staining on the underside where I could see it from the rail, filled in every box on the form. My handwriting was tight and controlled, and if you looked at the inspection sheet, you would see no evidence of fear. That was intentional. I finished at 10:52 a.m. I was standing at the west end of the bridge looking back at the Accord sitting alone in its lane when I heard it begin again. The siren. This time, I was ready. I braced my hands on the bridge rail and stared at the Honda, and I counted. The siren rose, held. I could feel it in the metal under my palms, a faint, sympathetic vibration. 8 seconds. 12. 20. The siren fell. Silence dropped over the bridge like a curtain. The Honda Accord was still there. I exhaled. Then I looked down at my hands on the rail, and looked at my truck behind me, and looked at myself, still here, still solid, still present. Whatever was happening, it had not happened to me. Not this time. But when I turned back toward the west end of the bridge, the gas station I'd passed on the way in a Casey's, clearly visible from the bridge approach, had its lot empty. 2 cars had been parked there when I arrived. They were gone now, and the lights inside were still on. I made a decision. Instead of continuing to the 3rd bridge, I was going to drive, not to a destination, through the area. I was going to see what the roads looked like. From 10:58 a.m. to 11:40 a.m., I drove a 40-mile loop through southern Camden and northern Laclede counties. I'm going to describe what I saw because the details matter. Route 54 south of the lake, empty. I passed one vehicle in 42 minutes. A UPS truck parked at a rural delivery point, engine running, package on the ground beside the rear bumper, no driver visible. The truck's hazard lights were on. Route 32 east toward Lynn Creek. A school bus was stopped at an intersection with its stop sign extended and its red lights flashing. No children around it. No driver in the seat. The bus was just running its stop sequence for an empty road. In Lynn Creek itself, a gas station open, lights on, pumps active, no one inside. A Dollar General with the front door propped open and a cart sitting in the entrance with items in it. A dog sitting on a sidewalk, leashed to a bench, waiting. I stopped at the Dollar General, walked inside, called out. The overhead music was playing. The register screen showed a transaction in progress. Someone had been scanning items. The total was $23.47. A bag of dog food, paper towels, a case of Diet Coke, and a pack of AA batteries were sitting on the counter, partially bagged. No one answered me. The store felt exactly the way a store feels on a normal Wednesday morning, except that the human element had been subtracted with surgical precision. Everything was in place. Everything was mid-action. Everything suggested a population that had been here moments ago and was simply, cleanly, not here now. I drove on. The pattern repeated in every direction. Cars at intersections, a tractor idling in a field with no operator, a woman's shoe in the middle of a crosswalk in Camdenton, just one shoe, lying on its side. Businesses open, parking lots emptying, the machinery of daily life still cycling without anyone to run it. And I kept passing through Sirens. They were not on a schedule anymore, or if they were, the schedule had accelerated. I heard a fourth at 11:12, a fifth at 11:29. Each time the radio cut out and came back, each time I watched the road, each time something was missing that had been there before. A parked car, a figure on a porch in my peripheral vision, a dog that had been barking. Not everything disappeared every time. That's the part that made it worse. It wasn't a clean sweep. It was selective, intermittent, like something was taking inventory and pulling items from the shelf one by one. At 11:40, I pulled into a Come-and-Go station on the north side of Camdenton because I needed fuel and I needed to think. The station was empty. I swiped my card at the pump, filled up, and stood there in the parking lot looking at the town. Camdenton is the county seat of Camden County. Population around 4,000. The sirens had gone off 5 times since 9:15 a.m. The streets were almost bare. I sat in the truck with the engine off and the windows down and wrote everything in my inspection notebook. Not in inspection format, just straight notes, timed and dated. Everything I'd seen since 9:15. I'm a documentation professional. I trust paper. Paper doesn't crash or lose signal or go to voicemail. While I was writing, a Camden County Sheriff's cruiser rolled past the station. I dropped the notebook and pulled out onto the road behind it. Followed it 2 blocks to the courthouse square. The cruiser parked. A deputy got out, young guy, maybe late 20s, moving quickly but not running. I pulled up behind him and got out. He turned and looked at me, and I could see it on his face immediately. He knew something was wrong. He was trying to figure out how wrong. "Sir, you need to get indoors," he said. Not aggressive, practiced. "I'm Elliot Crane, MoDOT field auditor." I showed him my badge. "I've been driving Route 54 since this morning. I need to report what I've been seeing." He looked at the badge, then at me, then up and down the empty street. "How long have you been in the area?" "Since about 9:30. "And you've been outside, in your vehicle?" Through the sirens? Every one of them. He stared at me for a long moment. Something crossed his face, not suspicion, more like recalculation, like I was data that didn't fit his current model. "Come inside," he said. "I need to make a call." I followed him into the courthouse. The building was functioning lights, HVAC, computers on at the front desk, but the lobby was empty. He led me to a back office, a small conference room with a county map on the wall, and a whiteboard that had been recently used. On the whiteboard, someone had written a series of times in red marker. 9:15, 10 o'clock, 10:07, 10:42, 11, 12, 11, 29. Under each time was a number. Under 9:15, the number 12. Under 10 o'clock, the number 31. Under 10:07, 8. Under 10:42, 19. Under 11:12, 44. Under 11:29, 27. "What are those numbers?" I asked. The deputy, his nameplate said Colton, looked at the board, then at me. "Missing persons reports. Per Siren event. Those are just the ones we've received calls about." He paused. "We stopped getting calls about 20 minutes ago, not because people stopped going missing. Because the people who would call are gone too," I said. He nodded once. Then he picked up the office phone and dialed. I heard it ring 3 times before someone answered. He said, "This is Colton at Camden. I've got a state employee here who's been mobile and outdoors through all 6 events, and he's still here." A pause. "Yes." "No, he didn't go anywhere. He watched it happen. He says the vehicles disappear." The voice on the other end said something I couldn't hear. Colton looked at me. "They want to talk to you." The voice on the phone belonged to a woman who identified herself as Supervisory Dispatcher, Missouri State Highway Patrol, Troop F, out of Jefferson City. She did not give her name. She asked me to describe, in order, every disappearance I had witnessed directly. I told her. The flatbed, the SUV behind me, the red Chevy on the bridge approach, the boats on the lake, the empty lots and stores and the idling vehicles with no drivers. I told her about the unfinished text message in the Honda and the booster seat in the back. I told her about the school bus running its stop sequence for no one. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. "Mr. Crane, during any of the Siren events, were you inside a structure, a building, a vehicle with windows closed, anything that would constitute full enclosure?" I thought about it. I was in my truck for the first 2. Windows were up, air conditioning on. And the third, I was on the bridge, outside, standing. "But nothing happened to you?" "No." Silence on the line. Then, "The current working theory, and I need to stress this is preliminary, is that the disappearances are occurring to individuals who are stationary or enclosed during the siren cessation. People who are in motion, on foot, in active physical transition, we have fewer reports involving them. The pattern is not clean. We are missing too many observers to confirm it." "You're saying people who are standing still when the siren stops are the ones disappearing?" "I'm saying we don't know. I'm saying the correlation we can see suggests proximity to stillness and enclosure at the moment the siren tone terminates. But Mr. Crane, we've also had people disappear from moving vehicles. We've had people disappear from open fields. The only consistent variable is the siren." "What's causing the sirens?" "The sirens are running on their normal municipal infrastructure. We've contacted every county EM office in central and southern Missouri. None of them are manually activating the sirens after the initial 10 a.m. test. The systems are cycling on their own." "That's not possible." Those systems require a manual trigger or a weather service alert. I know what they require, Mr. Crane. I'm telling you what they're doing. I heard someone talking in the background on her end. Multiple voices, urgent. I need to go, she said. Deputy Colton has my direct line. Stay mobile. Stay in open air if you can. And Mr. Crane, if you hear the siren start, move. Walk, run, drive. Do not be still when it stops. The line went dead. I handed the phone back to Colton. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and he'd heard enough of my side to understand. She told you to stay moving, he said. She told me the correlation isn't confirmed. Yeah, but she told you to stay moving. He pushed off the wall and walked to the whiteboard. Stood there looking at the numbers. We've got maybe 400 people we can account for in the Camdenton area right now. That's out of roughly 4,000. Probably more like 5,000 if you count the lake traffic and the tourists. Where's your sheriff? Don't know. He was on patrol at 9:15. Radio contact went dead at 10:07. His cruiser was found on Business 54 near the high school, running, empty. The weight of that settled into the room. The county sheriff gone during the third siren. His car still running. What about you? I asked. Where were you when they went off? He didn't answer right away. He pulled a chair from the table and sat down heavily. I was in the gym at the rec center at 9:15. On a treadmill, running. The siren went off, and when it stopped, 3 people on the machines around me were gone. Just the machines were still going. The treadmill next to me was still running at 6.2 miles per hour. The towel was still draped over the display. The guy who was on it was not. You were moving. I was moving. But the woman on the elliptical 2 machines down was moving too. And she's gone. That killed the theory right there, or at least wounded it badly enough that I couldn't trust it. Moving wasn't the variable, or it wasn't the only variable. I said this to Colton, and he nodded like he'd already worked through it. The patrol dispatcher isn't wrong that movement correlates, he said. Most of the people we still have here were in transit of some kind during the events. Driving, walking, stocking shelves. But it's not a guarantee. Some moving people went. Some still people stayed. Whatever the selection criterion is, we can't see it clearly. A phone rang somewhere in the building. Not the office phone further away, maybe the front desk. Colton looked toward the door, but didn't move. Let it ring, he said, then quieter. I used to answer every call. How many have you lost to that? 2. Debbie from the clerk's office answered the phone at 11:12, and she was standing at the desk, and the siren was going. And when it stopped, she was gone, and the phone was swinging on the cord. He said this flatly, reporting a fact. Steve from maintenance was in the basement, checking the breaker panel at 11:29. He was crouched down, not moving, gone. I looked at the whiteboard, the numbers under each timestamp. This was a county office trying to track the end of its own population with a marker and a flat surface. How much time between sirens? I asked. He looked at the list. Intervals are getting shorter. First gap was 45 minutes, then 7, then 35, then 30, then 17. If the pattern holds, the next one should be in 10 to 12 minutes. It was 12:01 p.m. We went outside. That was the agreement: when indoors, be near a door. When the siren starts, go outside. When outside, keep moving. It wasn't a guarantee. We both knew it wasn't a guarantee. But it was behavior. And behavior is the only thing you can control when you can't control anything else. The courthouse square was not deserted. Maybe 20 people were scattered around it, and they all had the same look. That specific expression where the face is calm, but the eyes are doing too much work. A woman was pacing the sidewalk in front of the hardware store, back and forth, a short circuit holding her phone to her ear. A man sat on the tailgate of his truck with two kids, maybe 8 and 10, and the kids were eating gas station snacks, and the man was watching the sky. 2 more sheriff's deputies were on the square, plus a Camdenton PD officer. They'd set up an informal checkpoint near the intersection, directing the few cars that came through. Stay in your vehicle. Keep driving. Do not stop within city limits. Colton introduced me to a woman named Angie Redmond, the county emergency management coordinator. She was standing next to a folding table that someone had carried out of the courthouse, covered in printed maps and handwritten notes. She was sunburned and her hair was pulled back tight, and she was the kind of person who looks more focused the worse things get. "You're the MoDOT auditor," she said. Not a question. "You've been driving all morning?" "Since 5:40. "How many siren events have you been through?" "6, counting the initial test." "And you're still here?" She looked at me the way Colton had evaluating. "You're one of very few people we've talked to who've been present through all 6 and remained. Most of the people we still have here missed 1 or more. They were in the shower. They were underground. They had earbuds in. Somehow they didn't fully experience the siren termination. But I did experience it. I was standing on a bridge in open air for the 3rd one." She nodded slowly. "Then I don't know why you're here. And I don't like not knowing, because it means our model has holes." Her model was being assembled in real time on the folding table. She'd mapped the 6 siren times against reported disappearances against the known locations of the remaining population. The data was sparse and ugly. The best she could say was this: the sirens were the trigger event. Every disappearance correlated with the cessation of a siren tone. No disappearances had been reported between sirens. The selection of who disappeared was not random. It followed a pattern they could not yet define. "Have you been in contact with the state?" I asked. "Troop F is coordinating. As of 40 minutes ago, the siren anomaly is confirmed in 37 Missouri counties. It is not limited to Missouri." She let that sit. "How far does it go?" "They don't know yet. Or they do know, and they're not telling county-level EM." It came at 12:09 p.m. Colton's interval estimate was almost exactly right. I was standing in the square with Angie when the tone rose from the south. The county siren is mounted on a pole near the fire station, about 3 blocks from the courthouse, and when it cycles up, you can feel the air change. It's a mechanical wail, not electronic, an old Federal signal thunderbolt, the kind that physically rotates. The sound comes at you in waves as the horn sweeps around. Everyone in the square reacted immediately. The woman who'd been pacing started walking faster. The man on the tailgate stood up and lifted both kids off the truck and set them on their feet and said, "Walk, walk now." The deputies moved. Not running, walking with purpose, staying in motion, circling the square. Angie grabbed my arm. "Move with me. Don't stop." We walked. We walked a circuit around the courthouse square at a steady pace while the siren held and the town vibrated around us. The sound was everywhere, bouncing off the brick storefronts, rolling down the side streets, filling the air so completely that it became the air. I counted my steps. I kept my eyes open. I watched. The siren began to fall. The pitch dropping, the rotation slowing, that long, descending moan that means the cycle is ending. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. The siren stopped. I was mid-stride, left foot hitting pavement. I kept walking. Looked left, looked right. Angie was beside me, still moving. Colton was across the square, walking. The two deputies were on the far sidewalk. The man with the two kids was still walking. Both children were with him. The woman who'd been pacing was gone. Her phone was on the sidewalk in front of the hardware store, still connected to a call. I could hear a tiny voice coming from the speaker, someone saying, "Hello, hello. Are you there?" before Angie stepped forward and picked it up and ended the call. "Lisa Dunn," Angie said quietly. She'd been here since the second event. She was moving. She looked at the phone, then at me. She was moving, Elliot. She was walking back and forth the entire time. I didn't have an answer. The pacing woman had been in motion when the siren stopped, and she was gone anyway. The model was broken again, or the model had never been right. Moving wasn't safe. Being still wasn't safe. Being inside, outside, in a car, on foot, none of it was a reliable predictor. "Then what's the variable?" I said. And I wasn't asking Angie specifically. I was asking the air. A car alarm went off somewhere east of the square. One of those cyclical ones. Whoop, 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 cutting through the post-siren silence. Nobody flinched. The alarm was just another system running without its owner. Colton crossed the square to us. His jaw was tight. I count 19 on the square now. We were at 22 before the siren. 3 more people. Gone. From a group that was prepared, that was trying, that was following every rule they could devise. Angie set the phone down on her folding table next to the maps and the notes and the model that kept failing. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then she straightened up and said, "We need to talk to the people who are still here, every single one. We need to find what they have in common, because it's not movement, and it's not shelter, and it's not awareness." "It might be nothing," I said. "Then we're dead. But I'm going to keep looking." Between 12:15 and 1:30 p.m., Angie and I talked to every person remaining on the courthouse square. 2 more siren events occurred during that period at 12:22 and 12:51. And we lost 4 more people across both. After the 9th siren, 15 people remained in the square. After the 9th siren, I stopped thinking of us as a group and started thinking of us as a sample. Here is what the sample looked like. Colton Wheeler, 29, sheriff's deputy, was running on a treadmill during the first event, had been in continuous motion since, except for brief periods inside the courthouse. Angie Redmond, 43, county EM coordinator, was driving to work during the first event, had been on foot since 10:30. Elliot Crane, that's me, 46, MOD, OT auditor, in a moving vehicle during the first event. On foot since 10:55. James Ott, 61, retired contractor, was mowing his lawn during the first event, rode his mower to the square at 10:30 after his wife disappeared from the kitchen. He'd been sitting on the courthouse steps since arrival, sitting, not moving, through multiple sirens. Still here. Diane Pruitt, 38, nurse at Lake Regional Hospital, was walking between patient rooms during the first event. Lost 11 patients and 6 colleagues over the next 3 hours. Drove to the courthouse when the hospital became untenable. Tyler Pruitt, 16, Diane's son, was in the car with her when she drove to the courthouse. Had been at school during the first event in a hallway between classes. His classroom had 24 students before the first siren. When the bell rang after the event, 9 desks were empty. Martin Bell, 55, farmer, was feeding cattle during the first event. Drove into town after his nearest neighbor's property went silent. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand from an old machinery accident. I note this because of what came later. There were 8 others. I spoke to all of them. I took notes. I looked for the common thread, the shared variable, the thing that separated us from the thousands who were gone. And I could not find it. We were different ages, different genders, different health conditions, different locations during the first event. Some had been moving, some still. Some indoors, some out. Some had heard the sirens clearly, and some had heard them muffled through walls or windows or distance. Some had been alone, and some in groups. There was no shared medication, no shared blood type that anyone knew, no shared activity, no shared geography within the county. The only thing we shared was that we were still here. James Ott, the retired contractor, said it plainest. He'd been sitting on those steps through 4 sirens and had not moved more than twice. And he was still here. And he was still here because, and he said this with the blunt clarity of a man who had stopped being impressed by theories an hour ago. Because it doesn't want me, son. Whatever's shopping, I ain't on the list. I didn't like that framing. I didn't like the word shopping. But I couldn't argue with the observation underneath it. The disappearances were not random, but the pattern wasn't environmental or behavioral. It was selective in a way that pointed inward, towards something about the individuals themselves, something we couldn't measure. Angie was having the same thought. She'd set up a second sheet of paper, a survivor matrix, she called it, and was logging everything she could think of. She included a column labeled unshared variable with a question mark. And she stared at it between entries, like she was waiting for the answer to rise off the page. At 1:30 p.m., the 10th siren started. We lost Martin Bell. He was standing right next to me. He'd been talking about his cattle. Mid-sentence. Then the siren stopped and the air beside me was empty and his hat was on the ground. After Martin disappeared, I picked up his hat and held it. And I couldn't put it down for almost 10 minutes. Not because of sentiment. We'd known each other for less than an hour. Because the hat was real. The hat was physical evidence that a man had been standing in a specific place at a specific time and was now not. The hat didn't disappear. His boots, his shirt, his belt, those were gone with him. But the hat had been in his hand, not on his head. He'd taken it off to wipe his forehead. He was holding it loosely at his side, and when he went, the hat stayed. That detail mattered. I said it to Angie, and she stopped writing. Things in contact with the body go, she said. Things not in direct contact stay. His wedding ring went. His watch went. His boots, his clothes. But the hat was dangling from 2 fingers, and it dropped. She looked at the ground near where Martin had been standing. There was a faint dust print where his boots had been. She crouched and studied it. The soles left marks. He was pressing into the ground with his full weight. Then the weight was gone, and the impressions stayed. She pulled out her phone and photographed the prints. Whatever this is, it has a contact boundary. It takes the person and everything in sustained contact with them. But it has a limit. That doesn't explain who it takes. No, but it tells us the mechanism has rules. Rules mean structure. Structure means it's not random chaos. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. I opened it. It read, "This is MSHP Troop F emergency broadcast. Siren events confirmed in all 50 states, D.C., and 14 foreign nations. Federal emergency status pending. Remain mobile. Stay in open air. Siren intervals accelerating nationwide. Average disappearance rate, 18% per event. Cumulative national disappearance estimate, 42 to 58%. I read it twice. Then I showed it to Colton, who showed it to Angie, who set her pen down and put her hands flat on the table. 42 to 58% of the nation in 3 hours. I tried to calculate what that meant for Camdenton. 4,000 people, maybe 5,000. 50% would be 2,000 to 2,500. We had 15 people on the square and maybe a few hundred scattered elsewhere in the county who hadn't checked in. The local rate was far worse than the national estimate. Or the national estimate was conservative. Or some areas were hit harder than others. Or the data was already outdated by the time it reached my phone. The message had no instructions beyond what we were already doing. Stay mobile, stay in open air. As if those had been proven effective, as if we hadn't just watched a pacing woman and a standing farmer disappear by the same mechanism we were told movement and exposure would prevent. From 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m., the sirens went off 4 more times. The intervals collapsed to approximately 20 minutes, then 15, then 12. Each time, we went through the same ritual. The sound rising, the group moving, the tone falling, the silence, the count. After the 11th siren, 13 people on the square. After the 12th, 13. No losses. Something held. After the 13th, 11. Tyler Pruitt, the 16-year-old, was gone. His mother, Diane, screamed one sharp, involuntary sound, and then she went quiet and sat down on the curb and didn't speak for 20 minutes. She was the most still person in the group, and the next siren didn't take her. After the 14th, 11 still. Another reprieve. There was no sense to it, no rhythm within the rhythm. Sometimes the siren took people, and sometimes it didn't, and we could not predict which event would be a taker and which would pass over us. James Ott was still sitting on the courthouse steps. He had not moved substantively in 4 hours, and he was still here. Diane Pruitt was motionless with grief on the curb, and she was still here. Colton had been pacing non-stop since noon, and he was still here. The selection was invisible to us. It operated by criteria we could not observe. At 2:45 p.m., between the 13th and 14th sirens, I walked to my truck and retrieved my inspection notebook and the dashboard GPS unit. The GPS was still functioning. Satellites were still up there. The road network was still mapped. The system did not care that the roads were empty. I sat on the hood of my truck and opened the notebook to a fresh page and wrote, "What do we have in common?" Then I listed everyone still present. Name, age, what they'd been doing, where they'd been. 11 people. I stared at the list, and I looked for patterns, and I found none. And I was about to close the notebook when a thought came to me that was so simple I almost dismissed it. I went back to Angie's folding table. She was on the phone. She'd gotten through to a state EM coordinator, and I waited until she hung up. "The people who've disappeared," I said. "Do we know anything about who they were trying to reach?" She looked at me. Lisa Dunn was on the phone when she went, calling someone. The woman in the Honda was texting someone. Martin Bell was talking about his cattle. But earlier he told me he'd been trying to reach his daughter in Springfield. Angie's face changed, not understanding yet more like the moment before understanding, when the shape of something starts to resolve. "Everyone who's gone," I said. "Were they trying to reach someone?" "Everyone's trying to reach someone, Elliot. We're in a crisis." "But we're not. You and I aren't on the phone. Colton stopped taking calls an hour ago. James Ott told me he doesn't own a cell phone. His wife is gone, and he has no way to call anyone, and he hasn't tried." She looked at the survivor list, then at the whiteboard with the timestamps and the numbers, then at me. "That's not enough data," she said. "I know." But it's the first variable that even partially fits. I know that too. We didn't announce the theory. We couldn't afford to be wrong in public, not with 11 people whose compliance and composure were the only things keeping the square functional. But Angie and I quietly reviewed every case we could. Lisa Dunn, on a phone call when she disappeared, confirmed. The Honda Accord woman, mid-text, confirmed. Martin Bell had told Angie separately that he'd been trying to call his daughter before coming to the square. His phone's call log showed 17 attempts to a Springfield number between 10 o'clock and 12:30. He'd stopped trying when the calls wouldn't connect. He disappeared 40 minutes after his last attempt. Tyler Pruitt, 16 years old. Diane confirmed he'd been texting his friends almost continuously since they arrived. She'd told him to stop not because of any theory, but because she needed him present. He'd put the phone away, but pulled it out again 10 minutes before the 13th siren. She'd seen him typing when the tone started. Deputy Steve, who disappeared from the courthouse basement. Colton said he'd been on his radio checking in with dispatch when he went down to the breaker panel. He'd had the radio on his hip, channel open. The school bus driver, no data. But a school bus driver on a morning route would have been in radio contact with the district dispatcher, almost certainly. The flatbed truck on Route 54 that I'd been following, no data. But a commercial flatbed on a delivery run, the driver would have had a phone, a dispatch radio, something, contact with someone, conversely. James Ott, no cell phone, wife gone, no way to reach anyone, still here after 14 sirens. Me, I'd made calls early on Sophie, Linda, 911, but all had failed or gone to voicemail. I had not successfully connected with anyone. Every attempt had been a dead end. Since arriving at the courthouse, I'd made no calls. I'd been documenting, not communicating. Angie. She'd been on the phone with State EM, but she was coordinating, not reaching for someone personally. Her calls were functional, institutional. I asked her if she'd tried to call anyone as family, friends, anyone she cared about. She went very still. Then she said, "No. My parents are in Oregon. My ex-husband is in Kansas City. I haven't tried to reach either of them." "Why not?" "Because I've been working. Because this is my job. And I've been doing my job. And I didn't..." She stopped. "I didn't think to call them. I've been too focused." Colton. He'd been on his radio to dispatch during the early events, but had stopped when dispatch went silent around 1100. He had not tried to call anyone personally. He had no spouse, no children. His parents were local, and he told me, with a flatness that indicated the thought had already been processed, that they were almost certainly gone. The pattern was not clean. It was never going to be clean with a sample of 11. But the shape was there, and the shape was this. The people who remained were the people who were not actively reaching for someone, not connected, not mid-contact, not extending themselves outward through a phone or a radio or a voice toward another specific human being. The sirens weren't selecting based on location or movement or shelter. They were selecting based on connection, active, directed, personal connection. The people who reached out were the people who were taken. I sat with this for a long time. Angie and I walked the square together slowly, not because movement was the solution, but because walking helped us think. And we talked through what it meant if the theory was right. It meant the sirens were not a weapon. They were a window, a moment of permeability when something could reach through and take a person. And the thing that made a person takeable was not where they were or what they were doing, but whether they were reaching. whether they had extended some part of themselves, their attention, their need, their love toward another person through any medium. The siren opens the window. The reaching makes you visible. The silence closes around where you were. It meant the safest people in the world right now were the ones who had no one to call. The disconnected, the isolated. The people who, by circumstance or by temperament, were not in the act of reaching for another human being when the tone stopped. It meant the most dangerous thing you could do was love someone and try to find them. I thought about Sophie, my wife, in Fulton. I had not successfully reached her. My call had gone straight to voicemail at 9:30 a.m. hours ago. I didn't know if she was home. I didn't know if she'd heard the sirens. I didn't know if she'd tried to call me. I had not tried again. Not because I'd known it was dangerous, I hadn't theorized this until an hour ago, but because I'd been swept into the fieldwork of observation and documentation and the purely procedural focus of trying to understand what was happening. My professional instincts had accidentally saved me. The part of me that documents instead of feels, that inspects instead of reaches, that part had kept me in the sample of the surviving. And now I knew, or thought I knew, and the knowledge was its own kind of trap, because now I could not call Sophie without understanding that the call itself might be the thing that kills me, not the content, not the connection achieved, the act of reaching, the extension of self toward another. I looked at my phone, her name in my contacts, her photo, the one from the back porch last September, laughing at something the dog did. I put the phone in my pocket. Angie watched me do it. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She'd made the same calculation about her parents in Oregon. She'd made it faster than I had, and she'd had the decency not to explain it to me. We kept walking the square. The 15th siren came at 3:08 p.m. 10-minute interval. The tone rose and held and fell and stopped, and I was mid-step, and I did not reach for my phone, and the silence landed on the square, and all 11 of us were still here. All 11. Colton counted twice, 3 times. 11. First event in hours, with no losses. He looked at me. Angie looked at me. Nobody was on a phone, I said. Nobody was calling. Nobody was reaching. 11 people stood in the square and looked at each other, and the thing we shared was the thing we were not doing. We told the group. There was no responsible way not to. If the theory was correct, withholding it was potentially fatal. Angie explained it plainly. She stood on the courthouse steps and spoke to 10 people, and she said, "We believe the disappearances correlate with active personal communication at the moment the siren stops. We believe the act of reaching out, calling, texting, radioing is what makes a person vulnerable during the window the siren creates. We believe that the people who are still here are the people who were not reaching for anyone when the tones ended." She said, "We are not certain. This is a theory based on limited data." But the last event produced 0 losses, and the only behavioral change was that no one in the group was actively communicating. She said, "We recommend that you do not use your phones. Do not attempt to contact anyone. Do not reach out to family, friends, emergency services, or anyone else by any electronic or broadcast means." She said, "I know what I'm asking. I'm asking you to survive by not doing the most human thing in the world." James Ott from the steps said, "What about talking? Talking to each other right here? Is that reaching?" That was the question. We didn't know. The disappearances we'd tracked involved mediated communication phones, radios, texts, person-to-person, device-assisted, directed at someone not physically present. Direct speech between co-located people had not, as far as we could tell, been a factor. but we couldn't be sure. I think proximity matters, I said. I think, and this is speculation, the reach has to extend beyond your physical location. You're reaching across distance. That's what the mechanism detects. So I can talk to you, but I can't call my sister. That's the theory. Ott nodded. Okay. He said it the way he said everything, like a man driving a nail into a board. One stroke, done. Diane Pruitt had not spoken since Tyler disappeared. She was sitting on the curb with her arms wrapped around her knees, and she had heard Angie's explanation, and she was looking at her phone on the ground beside her. Tyler's last texts would be on her phone. His friends' names, his voice in a voicemail somewhere. I crouched next to her, not touching, not too close. Diane. She looked at me. Her eyes were dry, past tears. She was somewhere behind her own face, in a room that the rest of us couldn't enter. I know what you're thinking about doing, I said. I need you to not do it. He's 16, she said. He's my son. If you call him, and the theory is right, you won't find him. You'll go where he went. Maybe that's where I want to go. I had no argument for that. There is no logical rebuttal to a mother's desire to follow her child. There is only the blunt fact that one living person is better than two missing ones. And even that sounds hollow when you say it out loud. Give me your phone, I said. Just for now. Let me hold it. You can have it back tonight. Just not now. She looked at the phone, looked at me, picked it up, and handed it to me without a word, and put her head back on her knees. I turned it off and put it in my vest pocket next to my own. 2 phones, 2 lines to nowhere, 2 silences that might be keeping 2 people alive. 3:17 p.m., 9 minutes since the last one. The intervals were still tightening. The tone rose. We did nothing. We stood or sat or walked, but we did not reach. 11 people in a courthouse square holding the most unnatural posture imaginable for a species built on connection. Deliberate isolation. Chosen silence. Hands at sides, phones off, mouths closed against the names of people we wanted to say out loud. The siren held. I stood in the middle of the square and looked at the sky, and the sky was the same flat blue it had been all day. Not a single cloud. Nothing to explain any of this. Nothing to look at except the empty air that used to be full of a town. The siren fell. Silence. 11. Colton counted, pointed at each person. 11. We held the silence for another 10 seconds, 20, 30. Nobody moved to grab a phone. Nobody whispered a name. 11 people breathing in the afternoon heat on a square, in a town that used to hold thousands, and the only sound was the flag on the courthouse pole, snapping in a faint wind. Okay, Angie said quietly. The 17th siren came at 3:25. 8 minutes. The 18th at 3:31. 6 minutes. Both passed. 11. 11. The acceleration was obvious now. The intervals were compressing towards something. A limit. A saturation point. A finale. The sirens were coming faster and lasting the same duration, roughly 90 seconds each, which meant the silence between them was shrinking. Soon there would be more siren than silence. Soon the window would be open more than it was closed. And if people elsewhere didn't know the rule, if they were calling their families, dialing 911, screaming into phones for someone to help, then every accelerating siren was another sweep through a population that was doing exactly what their instincts demanded. Reaching, connecting, crying out. The perfect trap. A crisis that punishes the crisis response. An emergency where the most dangerous thing you can do is call for help. At 3:31, after the 18th siren, Angie turned to me and said, "We need to get this out." Get what out? The theory, the rule, whatever you want to call it. People need to know. How? We can't call anyone. We can't broadcast. The moment we reach out, we don't have to reach out to a person. We write it down. We put it on paper. We put it on the road. I looked at her. You're a MoDOT auditor, Elliot. You have traffic cones in your truck. You have flares. You have a reflective message board in the back, the fold-out kind. I've seen them. You carry one. She was right. Standard equipment. A portable message board. The kind we set up at work zones. Reflective letters on a black background. Battery-powered flashers. I had the tools to build a road sign. And a road sign doesn't reach for anyone. It just stands there and waits to be read. We built it in 20 minutes. I backed my truck to the intersection at the north end of the square, the main approach from Highway 54, and deployed the message board. It's a fold-out A-frame, about 4 feet by 3, with slots for reflective letters. I carry a full alphanumeric set in a case behind the back seat. Angie dictated. I set the letters. We kept it as short as we could because the board has limited space, and because someone driving past at 50 miles an hour needs to absorb the message in seconds. The sign read, Siren event. Do not call anyone. Do not text. Do not use radio reaching out. Equals disappearance. Stay silent. Stay present below it. In smaller letters. Survivors at Courthouse Square. I set up the flashers. The orange strobes cycled against the afternoon light. Colton moved his cruiser to the intersection with the light bar running. We made the approach as visible as possible. Then we made 3 more signs. Angie had poster board from the courthouse supply room and thick markers. We wrote the same message in large block letters, and Colton drove them to 3 other approach roads into town. He went alone because he wasn't calling anyone, and his cruiser radio was off, and he was the most mobile person we had. While he was gone, the 19th siren came. 3:36 p.m. 5-minute interval. 10 of us in the square. No phones, no reaching. The siren stopped. 10. Colton returned at 3:44, 1 minute before the 20th siren. He'd placed all 3 signs. He'd also seen something on the North Road that he reported with the careful precision of someone who knows the information is important. There's a line of cars on 54 northbound, he said. Stopped. Maybe a dozen. Half a mile out. Just stopped on the road, doors open, empty. They're arranged like a traffic jam, but there's nothing blocking the road. I think they were all trying to leave, and the siren caught them mid-drive. Were they on their phones? I asked. I checked 3 of the cars. 2 had phones in the cup holders with active calls. One had a Bluetooth display showing connected to a contact named Mom. Connected to Mom. Calling while driving. Running from the sirens and reaching for a voice and being taken at the moment the reaching and the silence intersected. The 20th siren came. Held. Fell. 10. Colton, back with us, made it through. 10 people on the courthouse square in Camdenton, Missouri, at 3:49 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. 10 people who were alive because they were not reaching for anyone. 10 people performing the most sophisticated act of self-control a social species can manage, needing to connect and refusing to. I stood next to my truck with my hand on the warm metal of the hood, and I did not think about Sophie. I did not think about her in our kitchen, or her voice, or the way she says my name when she's annoyed, or the way she says it when she's not. I did not think about those things, because thinking is a kind of reaching, too. And even if the mechanism doesn't detect thought, I couldn't be sure, and I couldn't risk it. And so I stood there in the bright silence and thought about asphalt, and guardrails and bridge deck spalling depths, and I held on to the most boring parts of myself like they were a rope over a canyon. The 21st siren came at 3:52 p.m., 3 minutes since the last. The 22nd at 3:54, 2 minutes. The 23rd at 3:55, 1 minute. The sirens were almost continuous now. The silence between them was collapsing to seconds, the dying fall of one tone barely fading before the next one began to rise. The overlap created a kind of drone, a near-constant wall of sound with thin seams of quiet stitched between the cycles. And in each seam, the window opened. We stood together, 10 people in a loose circle in the middle of the square. Nobody was pretending to do anything else anymore. We were just standing and surviving. And the surviving was the only activity. The siren would fall, and there would be 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds of silence, and then the next siren would begin. And during those seconds, we existed in the gap, and we did not reach. 3:55, 3:56, 3:57. The sirens blurred into each other. I lost count of the events. 24, 25. The sound was so constant that the silences between felt like physical punctuation, like the spaces between heartbeats, brief and rhythmic and vital. At some point, I think it was around 4 p.m., but I'd stopped checking my watch. The siren that was cycling simply did not stop. The tone rose and held and did not fall. It stayed at its peak frequency, a sustained wail, the horn rotating, and the sound filling the sky without interruption. We waited. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. The siren held. 5 minutes. The tone was unwavering, constant. A single sustained note over the rooftops of a mostly empty town. "It's not cycling down," Colton said. "No. If it doesn't cycle down, there's no silence." "No. If there's no silence, there's no window." We looked at each other. 10 people in the square, sirens screaming overhead. And for the first time in hours, no gap, no seam, no moment of vulnerability. The siren held for 12 minutes. I timed it. 12 minutes of continuous tone, and during those 12 minutes, nothing happened. No one disappeared. The air did not change. The world just sat there under a blanket of noise, and nothing was taken. Then, at 4:13 p.m., the siren began to slow. The rotation winding down, the pitch dropping, the mechanical parts losing momentum. Not a controlled cycling, a loss of power. The motor was stopping. The sound descended. Lower, slower. The wail became a groan, became a moan, became a hum, became a vibration, became nothing. Silence arrived like a weight. I held my breath, did not reach, did not think of Sophie. Nothing happened. 1 minute of silence. 2, 3, 5, 10. No new siren started. No one disappeared. We stood in the silence for 30 minutes before anyone spoke. I think we were all afraid that speech might count, that any outward expression might be the crack in the seal that let whatever this was back in. So we just stood and listened to nothing and waited for the next siren to start. It didn't. At 4:45 p.m., James Ott stood up from the courthouse steps, where he'd been sitting for 6 hours, stretched his back, and said, "I'm going to go see about my house." Nobody stopped him. He walked to his truck. It had been parked on the square since mid-morning, and got in and drove away. No phone call, no radio. Just a man driving home to see what was left. At 5 p.m., I walked to the sign I'd built at the intersection. The reflective letters were bright in the slanting light. "Do not call anyone. Do not text." I stood there reading my own sign and wondering how long it would need to stay up. How long before the sirens came back? How long before someone could safely pick up a phone and say a name? Angie came and stood beside me. We didn't speak for a while. Then she said, "I need to check on the hospital." "Okay." "I'm going to drive there. I'm not going to call ahead." "Okay." She looked at me. "What are you going to do?" I thought about it. 2 more bridges to inspect. My clipboard in the truck, my thermos, probably cold by now. "I'm going to drive north," I said. "Back toward Jeff City. I'm going to leave the signs up, and I'm going to check the roads, and I'm going to see how far this goes." "And Sophie?" I didn't answer right away. The question sat in the air between us, warm and simple and lethal. "I'll go home," I said. "I'll drive to Fulton. I'll walk through the front door, and I'll see if she's there. And if she is, I'll stand in the same room with her, and I will not say her name until I understand the rules." Angie nodded once. "That's the worst thing I've ever heard," she said. "I know. Go home, Elliot." I got in the truck. I left the radio off. I left my phone off. I pulled onto Route 54 North, and I drove into the empty evening. The road was long and bare and quiet, and mine and I did not reach for anyone. The drive from Camdenton to Fulton is about 90 minutes on a normal day. With the roads empty, it should have been faster, but I drove the speed limit exactly. 55 through the county roads, 65 on the highway, speed limit, lane discipline, full stops at every sign, performing normalcy because normalcy was the only structure I had left. The road told the story. Abandoned cars at intervals, some on the shoulder, some stopped in lanes, some with doors open and engines dead. A motorcycle on its side near Eldon with a helmet resting upright on the asphalt beside it. A semi jackknifed gently into a ditch, its cab empty, its cargo of bottled water still sealed in the trailer. I passed through 2 towns. Both were like Camdenton. Lights on, doors open, population subtracted. In one of them, I saw a dog walking down the center line of Main Street with purpose, heading somewhere specific. And it was the most alive thing I'd seen in miles. No sirens, no tone. Just the engine and the road, and the sky turning gold as the afternoon aged toward evening. I reached Fulton at 6:22 p.m. Our neighborhood looked normal from a distance, closer, less so. Some houses had sprinklers running, hitting driveways where cars weren't parked anymore. A garage door stood open with the light on and tools laid out on a workbench with no one using them. I turned onto our street. Our house is the 4th on the left. White siding, green shutters, the garden boxes Sophie planted last spring along the front walk. The porch light was on, set to the daytime timer. Her car was in the driveway. I parked behind it, turned off the engine, sat. Her car was here. That meant she'd been home. Whether she was still home, whether she was inside those walls, or whether she'd been taken mid-reach for her phone. For me, for anyone else, I didn't know. I wouldn't know until I walked through the door. I got out of the truck. I walked up the front path past the garden boxes. I put my hand on the door handle. If she was inside, I could not say her name. Not yet. Not until the silence proved safe. I would walk in, and I would find her, or I would find her absence, and either way, I would not reach. I would stand in my own home, and I would not reach. I opened the door. I went inside. I closed it behind me. The house was quiet. I'm going to stop talking now.